What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored. They did it.
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah.
What the f*** are you talking about?
Hey there, hi there, hello there. With you once again on Friday, December 1st with Bowen on the Birds as the Eagles prepare to host the San Francisco 49ers in maybe the most anticipated NFC game of the season. I don't think that's overstatement too much, but certainly something that's gotten a lot of interest here and in San Francisco and its environs and many other places, I think. To help me out with that, right off the bat here, I have someone who's really good at a lot of things. Ann Killion, columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. Came to know her many, many years ago when I used to cover the Winter Olympics for the Daily News back when I was a hockey writer. Ann's done a whole lot of Olympics and World Cups and all manner of things. She's has a couple books, Hope Solo and Jenny Finch, I think, were the subjects. She wins that California Sports Writer of the Year award quite often. I think she and Sam Farmer basically switch off on that. You can hear my dog, by the way. That's Allie. It's a strange day here at the Bowen household. We're getting our main bathroom redone, and it was supposed to be done by now, but it isn't. So there's going to be interruptions, I would say. But let's just pretend like it's a really loud press box. And let's bring Ann Killion aboard.
Hi, Les. Your dog almost scared my dog who's sleeping in the room behind you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Allie's a rescue pet, and she's pretty harmless, but she wants to make people believe otherwise. So, and she's convincing in that regard.
My dog just is pretty chill. She just sleeps.
I like that. That's a good trait in a dog, I think.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Finally, after that bizarre NFC Championship game last January, that it was not what anyone expected. It was a 31-7 Eagles victory because Brock Purdy got hurt in the first quarter, and then the backup quarterback got hurt, and then they were trying to play Christian McCaffrey at quarterback for a while, and that didn't work. And it's something that I think Eagles fans kind of understood why San Francisco fans were upset, but then it kind of went on and on. There was a lot of things said about, I think Debo called James Bradbury trash and things like this. And there were some hard feelings developed, I think, between the two fan bases. So anyway, as we build up for this week's game, what do you take out of what happened last January?
Well, that was one of the most bizarre things I'd ever covered in my life. I mean, there was a lot of anticipation. There was a lot of excitement. I think everyone felt it was going to be a really well-matched game. And then it was over before it ever started. We never got to see that game. And yes, I know that really irritates the Philadelphia fan base. And I know that narrative irritates the players. But it's true. The NFL had to change the rules in the offseason because the 49ers were left without a functioning quarterback. And so I think when the schedule came out, this was the one I know from the 49er point of view that I was like, well, that's the game, and it's turning out to kind of be the game of the year, just where both teams are, what they've been able to do. Some of that trash talk, has made it feisty. A lot of 49er fans who were in the stadium that day had a really rough experience with Eagles fans. So there's a lot of talk about that. But I'm excited for it. I think these two teams are still really well matched. Of course, the kind of the difference with the 49ers from a year ago or 11 months ago is that Brock Purdy isn't just a third string quarterback who got forced into action. And who ended up getting hurt on the sixth snap of the game. He's the 49ers quarterback now. And so that's a whole different situation for him. There's I think there's pressure on him. I think this is going to be, he's had big moments. He's had 3 playoff games. He's won 2 of them. But that was still before he had been anointed as really the guy, before they traded Trey Lance away to say Purdy's our guy. I mean, back in January, he was still just a guy who'd been forced into action. And
Right.
And so I think this is a really big moment for him. It's not all on him, obviously. But I do think, and I wrote about this a little bit for my column today, is just, here and inside the 49ers locker room, Brock Purdy has nothing to prove.
Right.
He convinced everybody. But there's still a lot of skepticism in the NFL world, I think, about him. Someone asked him yesterday saying, that all the folks in Philadelphia, the media types, call him the weak link. And here's a pretty level-headed, even-keeled 23-year-old guy who just kind of was like, well, I hadn't heard that. I'm just trying to do my job. So I think, I think it's a super intriguing matchup, and especially the way the Eagles have been playing lately. I mean, what a gauntlet they have, and they are just, coming from behind and winning games. And I'm super, super impressed with the way the Eagles have been playing through. It hasn't been the prettiest stuff always.
No, it sure hasn't. It's been
that record sure looks
total
pretty.
chaos. It's been, and I think a lot of people nationally like to laugh at Eagles fans for being like, oh my God, that was the worst win I've ever seen. But it really, week after week, they've developed this personality of sort of giving the other team a golden opportunity to beat them, and then the other team not being able to close the deal, and then somehow they won, and it's, oh, great, and people here are kind of leery of that, I think, until a few days after the game, when suddenly the narrative shifts to, hey, we're 10-1. Why are all these writers writing that things aren't great? During the game, nobody thought it was great, but a few days later, that you kind of forget how it happened. It's not look too deep into that. 10-1.
Right.
But
right, and I think that the Eagles clearly, they've had some weird outings, but the end result is, did you get the win? And they, both these teams were left frustrated at the end of the season. Yeah. The Eagles, the 49ers think with a healthy quarterback, they probably could have gotten to the Super Bowl. The Eagles probably think they should have won that Super Bowl with the way they played. Yeah. So, there's a lot of juice in this game. And
there sure is. Yes.
And I would expect it to be a very close game. I would give the edge to the Eagles just because it's being played on their home field, and there's potential weather and all of that. And the one thing about the 49ers is they have not proved that they can come from behind and win. They have been the ultimate front runners in the league. They get out early, they just suffocate teams. They're just crushing teams in their wins. And then they had those 3 straight losses. And they did drive down into field position to win the game with a field goal, and they missed it in Cleveland, wet weather, by the way. And then they lost, really didn't look very good on a Monday night game in Minnesota. And then they just got crushed at home by the Bengals when Joe Burrow was looking like, sadly, he looked like he was going to be Joe Burrow again.
Yeah.
So they haven't until they prove it, they haven't shown that they can, really do what Philadelphia has been doing these last couple of months, which is, win the gritty, ugly, gross games. And I think that's what makes a champion. That's the kind of stuff, even the great 49er teams of the past, like the Joe Montana 89 team or the Steve Young 94 team that were, we view them now as machines, offensive machines that they just, couldn't be stopped. But they had some rough come from behind win, had to grind out.
Oh yeah. Those are the legends that you come up.
Yeah. That's where legends are made, right?
Yeah. Joe Montana against the Bengals, going down the field in the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And this isn't a playoff game. It's going to feel a lot like a playoff game, I think. And we think I'm sure everyone thinks these teams are going to see each other again. But I do think there is a lot of juice here. It's
yeah. I wanted to get your opinion on this. I maintain that Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy have some similarities to them. Obviously, Brock Purdy was the last player taken in the draft. Jalen was not, but he was taken in the second round.
Right.
And he was taken to back up. That was the initial idea, to have a cheap backup for a franchise quarterback from North Dakota State.
That is a very similar thing. Yes.
And if you look at their stats, Jalen has thrown more interceptions than Brock Purdy has this season. Otherwise, they're really not that far apart. I mean, Brock Purdy leads the league in completion percentage, but Jalen is, I think, 2 percentage points behind him. I think their games are a little bit similar. They're the same size. Neither of them is a 6'5", from the classic mode, passer. They both had questions about their arms. I think Jalen has certainly answered his. With Brock, I mean, he's playing so well, you don't hear those questions very much, but I think people still say, well, the 49ers lean so much on the running game. Christian McCaffrey might actually be the MVP out of that team more than Brock. I don't really think Jalen gets that kind of, I think he's maybe a year farther on in his.
Well, I think there were a lot of doubts about Jalen until the Super Bowl when he was so fantastic.
Yes.
I think that was his real coming out party, even though they didn't win, where everyone went, oh, this guy is fantastic. I think it's true that they're similar. They probably both have a little bit of a, chip on their shoulder. They both, were not perceived to be starters. Jalen's story isn't quite as dramatic as Brock's. And, a lot of people were like, don't keep bringing up the Mr. Irrelevant thing. And it's like, but you know what? It's part of if he goes on and becomes a really good quarterback and gets the team to a Super Bowl and wins the Super Bowl.
That's the story. Yeah.
Right. It's Kurt Warner in the grocery shelves. I mean, it's what we as writers just, we love that stuff. And I think he's kind of embraced it. I mean, you have to be pretty special to overcome that kind of draft position.
Yeah.
And, if you're a first rounder, and of course we saw it, with Trey Lance here and seen it all over the league, that if you're a first round pick and a high first round pick, you get all the benefits in the world. I mean, you have to really, and Trey is probably not a fair comparison because he really didn't play enough to show anything, but it was just so clear that Brock's command of the offense, his ability, it's just, and it comes down to reps. The guy played 4 years in college, and he played at a big Division I program, and he knows how to play football.
Yeah, that's I can certainly see that. Yeah, you were talking about the differences in the way the teams have played. I was looking at this earlier. So 7 of the 10 Eagles victories are by one score. 7 of the 8 49er wins are by multiple scores. And I believe the one that wasn't, there was a field goal kick late in the game or something that made it a one-score game that wasn't really that close.
I think that was the Rams game really early on where it was pretty close. Yeah.
So that's really a striking difference right there. But I think a lot of people see the top-ranked offense in San Francisco against a defense that has been – the Eagles had a lot of injuries in the secondary. They're reasonably healthy right now in the secondary, but they do have a problem at linebacker. They're down a couple linebackers. They've been easy to throw on over the middle, which is something the 49ers do very, very well.
It's something Brock Purdy does very well.
Yes. And you have Kittle right there to throw to.
There was a lot of talk with Kittle yesterday about the linebackers for the Eagles. And, everyone in the locker room yesterday very much, watched their words. Nobody's trying to give all the bulletin board material was said, back in January and February, but very much restrained response. But I think that I would assume that that's a matchup that they think that they can exploit. But I
would think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. What you're saying about the front, the jumping on teams. I mean, the other person who has a lot to prove. And again, in a regular season game, he's not going to change his reputation. But Kyle Shanahan also has the reputation as a coach who can't scheme from behind when he's from behind. He comes in, with those scripted plays, and they just put a stranglehold on teams. But if things go awry, he's got, I should have it in front of me. He's got a really crazy, it's like 0-36 if his team is trailing by 8 points or more in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. So, obviously the Super Bowls are where people think about, that was actually blowing leads, but he hasn't proven that he can come back. And some of that may be the personnel that he's had at different times, but there's some of the onus is on him as well.
I see. We're going to have to go to commercial here, Ann, but we'll be right back for another segment with you. If you can hang in with us, we certainly appreciate your presence today.
Hats.com is the premier destination for quality and fashion-forward hats and more, with designs for every style and trend. Locally based and run by Philly sports team fanatics, Hats.com can help you elevate your hat John. Utilize the easy-to-use guides at Hats.com to find your perfect size and style, and shipping and returns are free. Hats.com. Find yourself in a hat. Use code Philly for 15% off your order. Hats.com.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the next segment of Bowen on the Birds with Ann Killion, accomplished columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. And I wanted to talk about that 3-game glitch that the 49ers had. I thought it was really interesting. Brock Purdy did not play well during at least part of that. I saw a few of those games. They made a change after that, too. I believe Steve Wilkes moved down to the sideline from having been upstairs.
Yes, makes all the difference in the world.
So what is the difference? And I mean, obviously, he can kind of talk to guys eye to eye, but he doesn't see the game as well down there, I wouldn't think. With Steve Wilkes, what is help there?
So it was a really interesting period because, they just had that Sunday night game against Dallas and they just crushed Dallas. I mean, just crushed them. It was a completely non-competitive game. And they've been very good in general under Kyle Shanahan of keeping focus and not having a lot of swagger or a lot of strut or thinking they're all that. But I don't know. But I don't know how you can really keep that out of the locker room. Like, at that point they were they 7? No, they were 6-0. I think it was a 6-0 start, and they just looked like the best team in football. And then they go to Cleveland, and Trent Williams gets hurt in that game. I think Debo might have missed that game too. It's rainy. They're struggling. The defense wasn't playing very well. Nick Bosa was kind of still having a slow start after his big holdout. And then they drive down the field, and their rookie kicker, and a lot of people, including my colleague Mike Silver, have really faulted them for being this built to win now Super Bowl team. They all know that that's the goal, Super Bowl or bust, basically. And yet they didn't re-sign Robbie Gould, one of the best, the best playoff kicker in history. And they're relying on a rookie. So he misses the kick and they lose the game. And so that's the first thing. Then they come back on Monday night, and Steve Wilkes made an atrocious call at the end of the first half that resulted in a touchdown that just kind of changed the momentum. Brock Purdy it ended up turning out that he got concussed at the end of that game.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
a couple interceptions. Kirk Cousins, as he is wont to do against Kyle Shanahan, his old mentor, had an amazing game. Which so these two quarterbacks who are no longer going to be able to play the rest of the season had just fantastic games against the 49ers defense. And then the next one was, I think, the really bad one. I mean, Cincinnati by that point was playing well again after their rough start, and Burrow was really good. But it was at home. It was desperate time. You know, they needed to stop a skid, and they just got waxed by the Bengals. And Steve, and then they go into their bye, and they decide Steve Wilkes is going to come down on the sideline. I think everyone thinks too much was made of that. I mean, it's a very cosmetic approach, but they also went out and got Chase Young.
That had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah. So, and of course, Eagles fans know Chase Young really well, right? I mean,
in fact, Jordan Mailata noted this week that he will face Chase Young this week for the third time this year. They already played Washington twice.
They already. Oh, I didn't realize.
It's like they should start doing commercials together or something.
Yeah, and I don't follow Washington that closely, so I didn't know really all the ins and outs.
They're not very good.
Yes, I know that. I do know that part. But that Chase Young, that there were some complaints about him or some, whispers behind the scene, but he seems rejuvenated. Whenever you're in a dysfunctional organization and you get a chance to go to a good organization,
right? It makes a huge difference. Guys say that and I'm sure consciously they are trying just as hard, but it's a different mood. I covered a 4-12 Andy Reid team in 2012 that there were guys that just didn't want to be there, and you could tell that. And it didn't make them horrible people or anything, but it was, it's rare, the mindset that you can really, fight through that kind of stuff.
Especially in this sport where you're going out and you're putting your, health and life on the line. If you feel like you're in a dysfunctional place where people aren't trying that hard or they're different priorities, I just don't see how any of these guys can muster the courage to get out there on that field and do it. But so he seems super happy to be reunited with Nick Bosa. I think the Buckeye pass rush is, a thing. So, and I think there was just a certain amount of, pride in a really great defensive unit, figuring it out. The other thing on the offensive side, Trent Williams was out, and he is, of course, another refugee from Washington that Eagles fans know very well. I mean, I would say all this talk about who's really the MVP, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, I would say it's Trent Williams.
That's a good thought. Yeah.
He just is such a leader on this team. He's such a force. I feel like when he's not in there, they just aren't as confident on offense, and with good reason. He's fantastic. So all that was going on during the slide, and then they got the bye and they came back and they crushed Jacksonville.
Royal Billiard and Recreation proudly
Somehow we were on commercial there for just a second. We're teasing our commercial. It'll be in about 6 or 7 minutes. We'll be back in that commercial. But for now, let's let Ann talk about it. So the Jacksonville, they started the win streak with that, right?
They started the win streak with Jacksonville, and then they had the Bucks last week, and then and then they had Seattle, and that was to me that was a little bit of a trap game because they never play well in Seattle. Well,
it's hard to play well there.
Historically, have not played well in Seattle. It was Thanksgiving, and they played
great. They really dominated Seattle.
Purdy
had a team that played very well last night. If people think, Seattle's not having a great year, but you saw Seattle last night put up 35 on Dallas in Dallas, and that's a good win. But the Eagles, this brings up another point with the Eagles. The Eagles they're going to have an 8-week stretch by the time they play Seattle, where they will have played 7 teams that are likely playoff teams.
It's amazing.
They've gone from Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, and then Seattle. And that's going to be that's part of my thinking about this game, is that this is going to be a game they might lose just because that you just can't keep beating real good teams over, you're going to find there's going to be a week where it doesn't happen. And I don't think we haven't seen the injury report yet. I might make a total idiot of myself, but I don't think Dallas Goedert's going to play. They sent him out to practice today, at least partially, but I think that was more to give San Francisco something to chew on. I don't think he's ready to play. He has a fractured arm that's maybe needs another week. They have the linebacker situation. I just think this is looking at Dallas next week. Dallas is almost in the same situation as the 49ers are in vis-a-vis the Eagles, in that Dallas lost a game that to the Eagles just a few weeks ago that it thought it never should have lost, that it was a fluke loss, and it'll never happen like that again. And Dallas is good, as are the 49ers. So somehow the Eagles are going to lose one of these next two, and I think this
And which do you think that they would prefer to lose?
Well, that's a good question.
Would they rather lose this week to a team that they might face again in the playoffs? They still would have a 1-game advantage over for home field, or would they rather, I assume beating Dallas is, if you had to choose, beating Dallas is more important.
This might be the only time in recorded history where I think fans might pick the 49ers, just because I think people here think the 49ers are a better team. That Dallas game, the end of it was fluky, but the Eagles had a 28-17 lead in the fourth quarter. And, with a couple first downs, could have made that a very easy victory. I don't think anybody feels that way about San Francisco. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not taking any scientific polls here, but I think this is a bigger game, frankly. I think if you win this, you're likely to get that number 1 seed, because Dallas can only beat you once, and they have 3 losses, so but who can say? It's just such a gauntlet, and I just don't think the Eagles are going to go through it unscathed. When it started, people were saying, what do you think? 5-2, 4-3, you're not, to keep doing what they've been doing is almost impossible, I think.
It is, and it's this time of year where the wear and tear of the season. But I haven't, I don't use. Well, they make us make predictions in the paper, but and I'm gonna pick the Eagles because of what I said. I mean, they've done it, so they know how to do it. They're at home, one of the toughest places to play in the league. Could be wet. And just the 49ers, I think it's going to be a really close game. And I think it could be a 1-score game. And those are the games we haven't really seen the 49ers win. So that's why I would give the edge to the Eagles. But I fully understand that at some point you can't keep, winning that way. And I don't see either team really jumping up to a huge lead and, just crush it. I don't see it being a lopsided game.
If the Eagles have an advantage, it would be their offensive line, I think, is better than the 49ers offensive line, Trent Williams notwithstanding. But the offensive lines don't play against each other. You have to play the 49ers defensive line, which is very, very, very good, with Javon Hargrave, whom we know very well here. Player. The Eagles were able to replace him with a wonderful bit of luck in the draft, getting Jalen Carter. But nonetheless, very good player, and he went right to the team that that can hurt the Eagles the most, I think. I just think the Eagles' offensive line and the 49ers' defensive line is maybe where the game will be decided, but what do I know? Also, I think the Eagles' defensive line, I think the point that a lot of Eagles fans made after that NFC Championship game was, well, Brock Purdy got hurt because the guy they were trying to block Hassan Reddick with couldn't block Hassan Reddick, and Hassan Reddick, smacked his elbow. And, it's not like, he was hit by a bolt of lightning or something. The Eagles' defensive line is going to get after it. So, if they can really get after it, I think, that's something that would certainly work in the Eagles' favor. But the 49ers running game is so good. And I think it'll be a tough assignment for them. I really do. And you mentioned the weather. I think you're bringing your weather with us, 50-ish and possibility of rain. That's kind of how I see San Francisco a lot.
Well, we don't have any rain right now, but 50-ish, obviously that's not bad at all. Late game could be a little colder than that. I don't know. We'll see. I just want a game where both teams have a functioning quarterback at the end of the game.
That's a good thought.
And that we get to see kind of what we were robbed of last year, because that really was one of the strangest games I've ever covered. I mean, it was bizarre.
That's very well said, and that's a good way to send you back to the rest of your afternoon here, Ann. Thank you so much for doing this. We're going to go to commercial one more time, and we're going to have John McMullen when we come back, who covers the Eagles, and we'll have some stuff to say about what happened at practice today, I hope. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Les.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
And we're back for the third segment of today's Bowen on the Birds. And we have John McMullen coming in, a veteran sports writer who writes for a couple of outlets, Jakib Sports, Sports Illustrated. He's on the radio. He has a podcast. He's a master of all media, I think, is one way to describe him. Let's get John up here on the screen.
Well, thanks, Les. Yeah, I don't know about master, but I appreciate it.
How you doing down there?
Doing well. Friday, Deshaun Jackson retirement day, so a little bit more pomp and circumstance. Deshaun's got a documentary deal with Amazon, sort of like Jason Kelsey. So a lot of cameras down there following him around. So a little bit more excitement than even usual. And that's with the game of the year, which is about the third one for the Eagles so far. And they're going to have another game of the year.
Over that with Ann Killion. It is. I've never seen a stretch quite like this. I really haven't. I figured it out leading into the show. 8 games by the time that they will have played Seattle, 7 against teams that are pretty likely to make the playoffs right now. That's extraordinary. That's the opposite of last season. Pretty much polar opposite of last season.
Yeah, it's on paper, it's a murderer's row, so to speak. But they beat Dallas.
So far, they haven't gotten murdered.
They beat Kansas City. They beat Buffalo. So far 3-0. So far, so good. I do think these are the 2 toughest matchups. I think San Francisco is playing the best of anybody right now as we speak today.
Right.
And then obviously Dallas coming off. I don't think they played all that well, especially defensively on Thursday night, but they won the game.
Played pretty well, and that's
offensively. And they won it, and they won 14 straight less in AT&T Stadium.
At home, yes.
Yeah, this is a difficult 2-week stretch.
Yeah, it's just I think that kind of works against the Eagles in that I don't think you can really be perfect in this stretch. Something's going to happen somewhere.
You would think.
Yeah, I would think. Well, tell me a little bit about injuries today. You saw Dallas Goedert out there for the cameras anyway.
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Nick made
for the cameras?
Well, Nick made. I do, because you know what? I talked to Dallas on Wednesday. He was really honest.
Yeah.
He said, look, he feels ready to go. And he compared it to last year. If you remember, he broke a small bone in his shoulder, the glenoid bone. And he was like, he was put on injured reserve last year. And about a week before you have to sit out the 4 games, he was like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And we all thought, well, Dallas is going to be back as soon as he's eligible. And the Eagles held him out one more week. He ended up missing 5 games. And the doctors, Arstenoda and everybody said, hey, it needs the proper time to heal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he told me on Wednesday. He said, doctor said he needs 4 weeks to heal. 4 weeks exactly. The game against San Francisco's 3 weeks and 6 days. So he told me he's lobbying to play.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think they're going to let him play. So it's going to be interesting. I imagine the Eagles are going to play the game. They're going to list him as questionable, and the injury report will probably come out in a half hour or so. But if I were a betting man, unless he was lying to me, he thinks they're not going to let him play. But he thinks he's ready to play.
Now, what about Fletcher Cox? Are we going to see Fletcher Cox out there, son?
I do not think you're going to see Fletcher Cox. I do not think you're going to see Zach Cunningham. Really difficult for them to get back out there.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if Cunningham was ready, given.
Yeah. The good news is Milton Williams will be back. Missed last week with a concussion. So I talked to Milton yesterday. He's completely ready to go.
Great.
And he's been
a good player. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially against the run. Jordan Davis gets a lot of credit, deservedly so. But Milton Williams has been a big part of that as well. So,
and that's big this week, I think.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey, boy. I remember the 2017 draft last, and that was the one in Philadelphia on the Parkway.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the Eagles had the 14th pick and ended up being Derek Barnett. But there was a lot of, and I don't know if there was a lot of talk about the Eagles. We always talk about it every year.
Yeah.
Aren't taking a running back, aren't taking a running back. And 9 times out of 10, it's 100% correct. Like this year with Bijan Robinson, great player. The Eagles weren't taking him. They would have taken Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, because he's not just a running back.
No.
He's like Brian Westbrook 2.0 to me.
Yeah.
Brian Westbrook is the best pass catcher. Well, maybe second best to what's his name with the Rams when I first came on the beat. The guy's name I can't think of.
Marshall Faulk.
Yeah, there we go. That fella. He was great. The thing that really sets a running back who's a pass catcher out is not just catching the ball. A lot of backs can catch a ball, if they're just trotting out 5 yards and they throw them the ball. Brian Westbrook could run a wide receiver pattern and catch the ball.
Oh, yeah.
With the kind of detail and separation that a wide receiver would get. And I think that is the case with Christian McCaffrey as well. And that makes him much more than just a running back. I have to say, I remember that draft, and I was not high on him. I thought little tiny guy from Stanford.
A lot of durability questions. Yeah.
He has had some injuries over the years, but he's on a great team right now, and he might be the MVP of a great team right now. So there's not much you can say at this moment. But when he was with Carolina, there were times when he wasn't out there, and the team was lost. And I think San Francisco. I think if he gets hurt, San Francisco's not beating anybody.
Yeah, and it was you're right about the receiving aspect, because remember the Eagles at the time, it was Doug Peterson offense, so they were more focused on that passing aspect coming out of the backfield. But the thing about, and I remember talking to some personnel people around the NFL at the Combine, and they said he was the best route runner amongst the wide receivers. And that to me is what is unique about this San Francisco offense, because they also have Deebo Samuel, and Deebo can play running back like he's a running back.
Yeah.
So they can move those guys and toggle them back and forth, and they can each handle the other's position almost seamlessly.
Right.
And that makes it really, really difficult to deal with.
It does. And this is a good entree into my agree or disagree question this week, which I have neglected so far in the show, but we want to get to that. What I'm positing here is that San Francisco is the only team in the league, really, with weapons that might be better than the Eagles' weapons. I don't
I
think there's
agree.
anybody out there I
No.
would say that about in this league other than the 49ers. And I'm not sure it's true of the 49ers, but it could, especially without Dallas Goedert. I think they do have better weapons. That's quite an arsenal there. It really is. I mean,
I would take
I love Brandon Ayuk.
I love Brandon. I would take the Eagles receivers, AJ and Devontae. And AJ is a little banged up with a thigh injury right now, but I would take their receivers over Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. But as you mentioned, they're both great. I mean, they're both great. But all due respect to Dallas Goedert, who I love, George Kittle's, if he's not the best tight end, he's 1-2 with Travis Kelce, and Dallas is probably top 5. And again, Christian McCaffrey's a different type of player. As good as DeAndre Swift is, as good as he's been this season, he kind of plays off the other greatness of the Eagles, the Jalen Hurts at quarterback,
right?
The receivers that we just talked about, Dallas Goedert that we just talked about. Christian McCaffrey's the best running back in football.
And Deebo,
yeah. And that's where I think they differentiate. So if we're just talking pure skill position players, I think San Francisco has a slight edge. They also have a good third receiver in Jennings, so they're a little bit better there. But the Eagles, if you want to add quarterback in the mix, with all due respect, and I know Brock Purdy and my partner on Burst 365, Jody McDonald's the biggest Brock Purdy fan in the world. Yeah, I'm not buying that just yet. Jalen Hurts is, we know the numbers. They're historic less. You got to go back to 1950. He's won 14 straight games as a starting quarterback against teams with winning records. So as you talk about all that talk last year about the Eagles didn't beat anybody, well, who can you beat? He's beaten everybody with a winning record. Now we know the Super Bowl. But you got to go back to 1950. At some point, you have to give him his due. And he's a better player than Brock Purdy.
He is. I do think he has to be statistically a lot better than Brock Purdy this Sunday for the Eagles to win. And what bothers me in that equation is like this first half last week. If they have something like that, they're not going to win this game. They're not coming back and beating this team after a disastrous first half. They can't have guys, handing the ball off to guys that think they're blocking and, just the kind of crazy, running bubble screens to nowhere and stuff like that. They have to be sharp. I keep saying this week after week, but one of these weeks it's going to be true. They have to actually be sharp from the opening gun offensively.
I agree. I think if they play like they played in Kansas City, they're going to lose this game. I think if they played like they played against Buffalo, they're going to lose this game. But I also don't think they played well in those two games, and they were able to persevere and win. So, there's no law against them not playing better. And I think too many people are assuming, well, they're going to continue to play like that. I kind of, and I'm typically the negative guy, but lately I've been the glass is half full guy because all I do is show up and this team wins. So it's kind of hard to
it's
to
clear
bet
the
against
talent
them.
is there. They just mistakes, and I think in unimaginative play calls and things like that just kind of get them, and some injuries. The secondary injuries have put pressure on the offense that might not have been there otherwise. But the talent is there. They're as talented as any team in the league.
Yeah, I think I would argue these are the two most talented teams in the league, from 1 through 53. Just the best two rosters, I think, are facing off on Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. So they both have a ton of talent. So then I kind of delve into the styles, and that's where I think the Eagles have the advantage, because I think if you look at the one weakness the 49ers have, it's their offensive line.
Yes.
Other than Trent Williams. I put Trent aside. That's one of the great left tackles of all time. The other four guys are just guys. And I think they're not as well equipped to handle the Eagles' defensive front as the Eagles' offensive line is to handle the San Francisco defensive front, which is also really good with Nick Bosa and Chase Young and our old buddy Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead. I mean, they're tremendous, but the Eagles have the great offensive line. And we've already seen Lane Johnson. Lane's going to play.
Do you think he's all right? Do you think he's Lane?
He looks it. He looks, I mean, he's been a full go. He sort of popped some scar tissue from what he went through last year. And, Nick Bosa was the defensive player of the year, and he completely handled him.
He did.
And we, I don't know. When did Lane last give up a sack? I think it was 1933 when the Eagles started. So it's hard to assume anybody's going to dominate Lane Johnson. Their offensive line, and look, all we can do is nitpick about this team because they're 10-1 for the second straight season. And that doesn't mean they're not going to have plays where they don't look bad. I think they're also held up to this incredibly high expectation now to where, they got booed off the field at halftime, rightfully so, last against Buffalo. But I mean, people, in my messages, in my social media, people are saying, fire Brian Johnson. I'm like, they're 9-1. Settle down. Give them a little chance.
That's true. John, we're going to have to go to commercial here, I'm afraid, but we'll be right back with that. Hold that thought. Remember it. Keep it loaded and locked and all that stuff, and we'll be right back for it in a minute.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the final segment of today's Bowen on the Birds on A2D with John McMullen. And John, as you were saying.
What was I saying? I lost my train of thought. But Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, the ability to recover. And if you look at that walk-off play, I know I'm not a big fan of the bubble screen. I probably mentioned that to you on my show. It's one of the least people talk about the brotherly shove and the tush push, and that's not a football play, and Peter King and yada yada. If you're just talking about ugly plays, you should ban the bubble screen because it's ugly half of the time. If you watch Chicago on Monday night, they ran about 15 of them. Ugly, 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 and then they break one every once in a while. But the Eagles set that up perfectly with a fake bubble screen. They had DeAndre Swift,
right,
and 3 defenders because they set it up, and all of a sudden you got the quarterback draw. Jason Kelce kicks out, Jordan Mailata with a great seal block, and bang, you walk off with a win. So, sometimes it's more than just about the play in the moment. Sometimes you're trying to set teams up down the road, so to speak, and I think Brian's done a pretty good job, and it's an interesting disconnect because around the league, he's going to get a lot of interviews in this hiring cycle. And if the Eagles go where we think they're going, fans aren't going to have to worry about Brian Johnson because he's probably going to be a head coach somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I discussed this the other day on your show. It's hard to differentiate sometimes what's a Brian Johnson problem from what might be a Nick Sirianni problem. Like the lack of motion, the fact that Nick doesn't like to. And I've said this over and over again. I really hate that answer he gives about how we don't want to do motion just to be doing motion, as if anybody
don't do motion.
Show me a coach in the National Football League who says, we just do motion to be doing motion. We're not really trying to achieve anything from that. And the lack of a hot read on a blitz, as much as they get blitzed, that drives me nuts.
That I think is the biggest issue, where you and I agree with the lack of blitz beaters, so to speak. They tend to, there's where they use the bubble screen a lot to beat a blitz, and really you should be thrown behind the blitz.
AJ Brown. That would
exactly
drop, boom.
the old adage of linebackers come and throw it right at him, throw it right behind where he's coming from, and that kind of thing. I just don't think that's the type of offense they run. They run, let's be honest, they run a college-like RPO based offense, and they're not a Bill Walsh masterful West Coast offense, and that's a lot of the NFL, unfortunately, in the modern game. I'm not a big fan of it. Hard to argue.
Well, I would say that if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, that Nick might have to get under the hood a little bit and tinker with that, because I think they went into this season thinking they were going to run those RPOs and run Jalen Hurts like they did last year, and they ran into a wall there. They have not been able to RPO their way through this.
No, it's been more of a struggle. And I asked him this morning, as a matter of fact, because all of a sudden, if you remember, the first 4 games, they were really bad in the red zone, and they were a tremendous red zone offense last season. Right. All of a sudden, since week 5, they're like off the charts.
Yes.
And the past couple of weeks,
they've
been perfect. So they're getting better. They are evolving a little bit, changing a little bit, because I think a lot of their success last year was based on Jalen Hurts in the running game in the red zone, and people were trying to take that away, and it took them a while, but they've adjusted, and they're doing well over the past number of weeks. So there is some evidence that they are sort of trying to be a little bit more malleable, and maybe they get to those traditional blitz beater type plays at some point.
Good thought. A viewer just brought up, I almost said a reader, but this is a different medium. We don't have readers here. A viewer just brought up the possibility of Zach Ertz coming home. I like that idea. I don't expect that he would be, splitting reps with Dallas Goedert or anything like that, but having another guy in the stable who can, especially since we've seen that Dallas Goedert can get hurt, I don't see a downside to have. Zach Ertz isn't going to be a distraction to anybody or a problem for anybody. He knows his way around. He was here under Nick Sirianni, so he knows, the basic outlines of what they're trying to do. How do you feel about this?
A lot of it depends on what Zach wants. Obviously he loves Philadelphia. That he's still a big part of the community. But it was kind of, I don't want to say ugly, but it wasn't great when he left. He still wanted a more impactful role, and the Eagles wanted to go towards Dallas Goedert. So he would have to accept the obviously the co-starring role. That's number one. Number two, if he wants to play a lot on a contender, Baltimore would probably be better for that. Because
I was thinking that's the biggest obstacle. Is there a couple teams that would really give him, if he's up to being a number 1 TE at this point for a playoff team, if he's really healthy enough and still quick enough to handle that he can find a bigger role somewhere else, probably.
And I think it would be right down I-95, and he could still get up to Philadelphia quickly. If he wanted to handle it that way. If you think about just the fits, I mean, in essence, you want Dallas plays 90% of the snaps when he's healthy. And Jack Stoll's important as a blocker. Obviously, that's not Zach's strength.
It's not his strength, but he's not a terrible blocker. He could go out there in a 2 tight end set and be.
No, he could, but if you think about what they were with the 2 tight end set with Dallas and Zach, they would put Dallas in line. That was one of the Eagles' problems. They wanted Dallas more as a flex receiver, but since he was the better blocker,
he would go on the line.
He would go in line, and now, do you really want to play Zach Ertz in line and Dallas Goedert flex? They probably do the same thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I don't know if it's a fit, but is he better than Grant Calcaterra, Albert Wegbenon? Yeah, obviously.
And that's kind of what I was thinking is they've got these 2 guys that are ostensibly there as pass catching tight ends. Neither of those guys is blocking tight end. No. And they don't throw to either one of them.
No. Anyway, that's that good point, Les. They don't they throw the ball to AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and then everybody else gets the scraps. And even DeAndre, if you want to throw DeAndre in there.
But it wouldn't hurt to have another possibility.
No, it wouldn't hurt, especially if Dallas gets hurt again. I mean, Dallas plays a reckless style of football. Let's be honest. He won. What is who has the guy on the NFL Network? I'm forgetting his name, but he has that angry run trophy. Dallas, Dallas has won it twice this year for just basically attacking defenders as he runs down the field. Makes for great highlights. Also makes for the occasional broken forearm. So he might be susceptible to injuries at this point. So it would be nice to have the depth. And I'm not saying the Eagles won't do it, but I can't get in Zach's head. But if he wants a bigger role,
right,
I think Baltimore would be a perfect fit for him.
Good thought. Before I let you go here, how do you see this game unfolding Sunday? We've got 50-ish, maybe some rain. That might have an effect on the game. How do you see what kind of game are you looking for between these 2 teams?
Everything tells me, Les, that the 49ers should win this game. The 49ers are playing better. They're undefeated when Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel are on the field. The only games they lost are when they were out of the lineup. But the Eagles find ways to win games, and Lincoln Financial Field. And as I said earlier, styles make bites. I don't think the San Francisco offensive line can hold up against the Eagles defensive front, which to me is even better with Jalen Carter this year. All due respect to Javon Hargrave. And I know Fletcher won't be there, but if you look at PFF rankings or anything like that, the 4 worst players on the San Francisco offense are the 4 offensive linemen not named Trent Williams.
Yeah.
So how are they going to block Hassan Reddick and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Milton Williams and Brandon Graham? I leave Josh Sweat out of it because Josh is going to have a tough afternoon, to be honest. But
and that would impact the 49ers running game as well. I don't see those guys winning a lot of battles in the running game up front, which is important to the 49ers because they don't want Brock Purdy having to throw the ball 30 yards down the field.
And by the way, the Eagles, the last thing I'll say is the Eagles, I think you're going to see a lot of big nickel. So everyone's saying, what are you going to do without Zach Cunningham? Christian Ellis is going to play. He's the next man up. But I think in known pass situations, you're going to see Kevin Byard with Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown on the field. I think you're going to see a lot of 3 safety looks. And essentially, when they did that against Buffalo, was Byard playing that sort of pseudo linebacker, Malcolm Jenkins-like role for everyone. Malcolm would occasionally do that type of thing.
Yeah, and Ben Van Sumeren is just here to play special teams, right? They're not going to throw him out there.
I mean, he might, he's a play away now.
Yeah, true.
If somebody else gets hurt, he might have to play. But I don't think Ben is very athletic, but very raw. That was the book coming. He went to Michigan, then he went to Michigan, then he went to Michigan State, or vice versa.
Let me break in here, John, before we go. Our producer, Ralph Dell, tells me that the Eagles have just listed Dallas Goedert as doubtful for Sunday in a rare bit of honesty.
Rare bit of honesty. Yeah, it just came out.
He's not playing.
And that's what he told me. And Dallas is very honest, probably too much so for Nick Sirianni. But he, as I said, he was very honest with me on Wednesday, and Nick made a big thing of it for the cameras today. And I think that was just put doubt in San Francisco's mind. But yeah, that's kind of a surprise. I thought they'd go questionable.
Just to kind of keep that question in mind. But that's going to be it for today's Bowen on the Birds. And we've really appreciated everybody watching this. And we've certainly appreciate John McMullen taking time out of his busy Friday afternoon. And thank you very much, John. And I'll see you again soon, I hope. And everybody out there, have a great weekend. I hope the game goes the way you want. And take care.